I didn't receive an invitation to my sister's wedding. I discovered this while balancing a paper plate of macaroni salad, positioned between the lemonade stand and a beer-filled cooler. It was June, and the heat was intense enough to make the plastic forks buckle under the weight of the potato salad. My aunt, Heather Morgan, had just put on a Tracy Lawrence playlist, and a toddler was wailing close to the bounce house. Olivia Harmon was the one who mentioned it. She had just come over from the grill, tossing her hair away from her face with one hand and holding a hot dog in the other. "So," she said brightly, "are you flying out for my sister's big day, or just driving over?" I froze. "Which big day?" I asked. She chuckled, assuming I was joking with her. "The wedding, of course. That's what I mean. She's finally tying the knot with my sister's fiancé." "Lucas, right?" I grinned as if I completely understood what she was talking about. "Oh yeah, of course," I replied. After that, I made an excuse to go check on the deviled eggs, which actually meant I needed to sit alone in my car with the air conditioning blasting, desperately trying to calm the strange, abrupt quiet in my chest. Beatrice was my youngest sister. After our father passed away, I played a big part in bringing her up. I was the one who held my sister's hair when she got sick at her very first college party, and I sent her money on more than one occasion when she forgot her rent was due. When Beatrice began having panic attacks, I mailed her a weighted blanket, and it was my voice she listened to on the phone for hours, the night she was convinced Lucas had been unfaithful. And now, my sister was about to become his wife, with fresh flower arrangements, a booked venue, and from the looks of it, a guest list that left me out. I sat behind the wheel for 15 minutes, unable to tell if I was more upset, angry, or just worn out. The truth was absolutely all three. While inside, I noticed that someone had already sliced into the strawberry sheet cake. Peering through the window, I spotted my cousin Olivia, deep in conversation with my mother, who wore her go-to light blue summer dress and appeared completely serene, as though everything in life was precisely as it should be. I glanced down at the plate I was holding. The macaroni was glistening in the warmth. They had organized a wedding, one that my sister never even brought up, and somehow I was the only one who looked taken aback. I waited 4 days before deciding to phone my mother. It wasn't that I needed extra time to settle my emotions. I couldn't really say I was upset exactly, nor was I hoping to get an apology. What I truly wanted was just to hear my mother openly acknowledge that they had arranged everything without involving me. She answered on the second ring. "Hi, honey," she greeted me in that brisk, matter-of-fact tone she reserved for dealing with cashiers and the church staff. I envisioned her back in the kitchen, cleaning the countertop with a dish towel, the phone wedged between her face and shoulder. "Is everything okay?" "I just wanted to ask you something quickly," I said, making sure my voice sounded relaxed. "Is my sister getting married?" There was a brief silence, then a soft intake of breath, followed by the fridge door thudding shut. "Well," she replied, as though I'd simply questioned whether the mail had arrived. "Yes, in 2 months, in fact." We weren't sure if I would be available. I hadn't even realized it was happening. She gave a small laugh. "Oh, Vera, don't make such a fuss." That word again. Dramatic. It was identical to the voice my sister used when I broke down during Dad's funeral, when she told me to keep myself in check. She'd said it too, when I called her crying after getting laid off 6 years ago. "Don't blow things out of proportion, darling. You'll regain your footing." I allowed a quiet pause to fill the space between us. "You know," she went on, "Beatrice really hoped for something intimate. Only relatives." "I am family," I protested, letting out a sigh. "Yes, but you're always away, and things like this get tricky," she replied. "Lucas's parents were very involved, and there were only so many invitations. Do you see what I mean?" I didn't really understand, but I was wise enough not to admit it. "You aren't upset, are you?" she suddenly asked, her voice gentler. "I'm honestly not sure how I feel." Another lull followed, this one heavier than before. Then we figured this would make things simpler. No one would feel too much stress. Simpler, that was the word they chose. The issue wasn't that I slipped their minds. The reality was that I was the easiest person to leave out. I claimed I needed to return to my job, despite not being scheduled that day. She responded, "Okay, sweetheart." Just like that, our call ended. I gazed at my phone for quite some time. Then I pulled up my calendar, scrolled ahead to 2 months from now, and checked the last weekend of June for any wedding plans. There was nothing on the books, no RSVP, and no spot saved for me. I didn't go around slamming doors or venting online. I didn't call my sister for answers, and I never drafted some long, lonely message that would be ignored. What I did instead was book a flight to Finland. I kept the plan entirely to myself. Not a word to my colleagues. I didn't mention it to Mrs. Delaney, who would usually take in my mail while I was away. I even stayed quiet to my friend Maya, the one who had helped me survive 2 breakups and a layoff, and who could recite my coffee order better than most baristas. I simply stopped responding to things. That Thursday, I filed a vacation request with HR, tossed a few essentials into a small bag, and slapped a single note onto my fridge. Gone. Don't wait up. The plane ride from Baltimore to Tampa passed in silence. I didn't bother with a movie. I didn't touch my book. I just watched as the little seatback monitor displayed the flight path glowing across Norway as a shining white line, curving like a scar. By daybreak, I found myself inside a rental cabin tucked into a hillside of volcanic stone, mostly draped in moss and quiet. The lake beyond the window appeared frozen, although it really wasn't. When morning arrived, condensation fogged up the glass. The scent in the shower was tinged with a hint of sulfur. I was enchanted from the first moment. For 36 hours, I left my phone untouched. On the 4th day, I wandered down to the edge of the lagoon for a walk. Snow almost covered a wooden bench there, and I sat until my fingers went numb. I snapped a picture. It turned out flawed. I wasn't grinning, just a person cloaked in wool sitting by calm water beneath a pale sky. No caption, no hashtag, just the shot itself. I added it to my Instagram story. Within 15 minutes, the spotlight landed on Beatrice Langley. My cousin and my mother were present. There was complete silence among everyone. I never anticipated any words from them. The intention lay elsewhere. What mattered was that they noticed my presence. Not during the bridal shower, nor at the rehearsal dinner, and not at the brunch for wedding planning, which I hadn't even heard about, but right here in a land of frozen peaks, rising vapors, and quiet. For a brief while, I felt seen. I refrained from posting anything on social media the following day. Instead, I simply existed. I spent my morning sipping strong, bitter coffee from a ceramic cup while I watched fog drift over the surface of the lake. I put pen to paper in my diary, writing, "Nothing flowery, only a list of what I didn't have to do in this place. No forced conversation, no pretending to be okay, no responding to RSVPs, no registry for gifts, just myself and the noise of ice moving through the wind." Deep down, I still understood the wedding was next weekend, even if nobody had spoken the date aloud. I pieced it together the way I imagine most people do when it comes to family secrets, from a cryptic comment on social media. My cousin had shared a looping video of champagne glasses clinking, with a caption that read, "Love fills the air." Then someone else tagged a small hotel an hour and a half outside of Rochester. That was all I needed. Sunday morning in Finland unfolded in a hush of silvery light. Wrapped in a blanket, I perched near the window and watched sunlight gradually stretch over the lake. There were no chiming bells here, no wedding music or bridesmaids giggling behind nearby doors. Nothing but snow, mist, and absolute quiet. I prepared some oatmeal. I didn't reach for my phone. By the time dusk crept in, the ceremony had probably already begun. Perhaps my sister was making her way down the aisle in a sleeveless dress of lace, with our mother likely weeping on cue. I pictured gentle lighting, pale-colored flowers, and a quiet sense of happiness that seemed filtered through soft focus. And somewhere among all of that, there would be an empty space in the photos. Not in any obvious way, but just enough for me to feel it. They would have adjusted the seating or filled the row, but I knew exactly which chair should have been mine, and it remained vacant. Later that evening, I shared another picture. In the image, I clasped a ceramic mug with the icy lake stretching out behind me. The horizon glowed with a lavender hue. On one finger, my nail polish was a bit chipped. There was nothing fancy about the snapshot, nothing staged, and I left it without a caption. Again, the list of viewers appeared almost instantly. My sister, my mother. Two of her friends I hadn't exchanged words with for years. Yet still, not a single person reached out. There was only silence. However, this time, I sensed a change. The hush wasn't just about missing someone anymore. Now, it was about someone choosing not to show up. I pictured them flicking through their phones between dances or during dessert, catching sight of my post in a quiet moment, and wondering whether it was a signal. It was. That meant I understood. It meant I was observing not with bitterness or envy, but because I used to be important in this place. And at this point, I wasn't important anymore. I didn't matter enough to get an invitation, but I was significant enough to linger on the margins. I didn't make another post for 4 days. I decided to let them notice my absence, to let them weave their own explanations for the quiet I left behind. I didn't have any contribution left to make. 4 days after the wedding, I was jolted awake by my phone vibrating on the bedside table. It was just past 7:20 a.m., and the world outside was draped in a dull, watery gray. That shade of sky could almost convince me that sunlight never happened. My phone continued to vibrate with notifications, texts, missed calls, then even more texts. For a moment, I wondered if there had been a death, but the names lighting up my screen suggested something else. Meredith Doyle, Heather Morgan, my mother, and then Gabriella Quinn reached out to me. At last, Maya Easton, who was always honest with me, sent a message. Her note contained no pleasantries or drawn-out introduction. "You have to watch this." Included with her message was a link to a TikTok post, with no explanation beyond a preview image showing what appeared to be a banquet space and a speeding, indistinct object in the air. I paused for a moment. I felt uncertain about whether I should open it. I didn't know if I was ready to learn the contents, but I decided to view it anyway. The clip began in the midst of pandemonium, with people yelling, gasping, and moving about. One of the bridesmaids was shrieking, her voice strained with anger as she flung a bouquet across the venue, not from happiness, but from rage. This wasn't a ritual throw, but an expression of pure fury. Guests were on their feet, shifting and backing away from the predicament. Someone accidentally tipped over a floral arrangement on one of the tables. I heard the sound of glass breaking, just out of the camera's view. The video then panned to my sister. Tears streamed down her face, not soft ones, but uncontrollable, with her cheeks red and streaks of mascara running down. She was shouting something, but the words came out garbled and unclear. The next voice that spoke was easier for me to understand. I remembered that Beatrice Langley, my sister and maid of honor, had been my closest companion, and throughout it all, she was involved with him. Lily Cross, my closest friend since our first year of college, was the one speaking. She was the very person who organized the trip for my sister, the bride-to-be. She was also, as it turned out, the one who seemed to want to marry Lucas Foley herself. I felt my insides twist. Another guest, sounding almost amused and shocked, remarked, That's the maid of honor. The camera shifted just enough to capture Lucas Foley caught in the middle, his hands raised as if calming wild creatures. He muttered something I couldn't quite hear. None of it made a difference. The other guests had already started to shift around, people murmuring, reaching for jackets, collecting their bags. Someone exited clutching her napkin. The clip finished with my sister crumpling onto the ground. I replayed it once more. After that, I flipped my phone face down and gazed up at the ceiling of my cabin. The wooden support beams groaned in the chill. I heard a bird somewhere beyond the walls, its call unfamiliar to me. That persistent buzzing resumed. Voicemails and missed calls stacked up. New messages accumulated over old ones. Although nobody spoke the truth aloud, it was understood. Please get in touch with me. My sister is falling apart. You're needed at home. Vera, please. By 1 p.m., my voicemail included a message from my mother, her words flickering like static from a distant world. Within it, my mother explained that Beatrice hadn't been eating, that our relatives felt ashamed, and that rumors were swirling. She didn't include any admission that my suspicions had been accurate. An apology was not offered. She neglected to ask about my own well-being. Her only words were, "We're lost here without you." I remained by the window, my feet bare and cold against the floorboards, studying the way the lake's surface rippled in the wind. My phone vibrated one more time. Now it was Lily Cross who was reaching out. Not a call, just a message. "I'm sorry you weren't available. You probably would have talked me out of it. She wasn't right. I wouldn't have intervened. I would have simply allowed the truth to emerge as I had." As the early afternoon arrived, my phone no longer rang insistently, but seemed to beg for my attention. The messages shifted. They were no longer curt or irritated, but had taken on a gentler tone. My mother left 6 voicemails in just 4.5 hours. Each one sounded a bit more fearful than the previous. In the 4th, her voice was broken or trying not to be. She sobbed out my name, Vera. "Your sister, Beatrice, is shattered. We haven't seen her leave her room since Sunday. We're at a loss for words with her. We need you back at home. I have always seen myself as the resilient one, the person who keeps us steady." And there it was again. That phrase, the strong one who knows how to shoulder the burdens. I never wanted to be a burden to anyone. I stayed silent. Instead, I made tea by boiling water and wandered outside, feeling the steam on my cheeks while a cold breeze sliced through my jacket. The sky stretched on forever above me, soft and still. I snapped a picture of the horizon, a gentle pink glow clinging to the edge of a glacier, and uploaded it in silence. 15 minutes later, my phone vibrated. "She's not doing well. She keeps calling for you. Vera, I'm begging you. Just 5 minutes." That message was from my aunt, Heather Morgan, the same aunt who once told me, after my father, Charles Langley, passed away, that eldest daughters are like spare mothers. I was only 15 years old. I stared as the snow blew over the porch step and held my tongue. Later that night, I received a message from my sister. Instead of calling, she just sent a text. "I know I've hurt you. I didn't realize it would have this much of an impact. I thought you had decided you didn't want to be involved anymore. I begged you. I really need your help. I don't know who else I can turn to." I gazed at the message for a long while. It wasn't that I doubted her sincerity, but it was the first genuine thing she had communicated in years. Still, that wasn't enough. Not after all those times she accepted my support, but never truly welcomed me. Not after quietly allowing me to slip away from the family without ever checking to see if I was still there. No one missed me. They only missed what I brought to them. Now, as everything unraveled, they wished for the familiar support system to come back. But I was no longer unbreakable. I had turned into a glacier. Frozen, unmoving, resolute. It was almost 11:30 p.m. when the phone rang once more. This time I answered. It wasn't out of forgiveness. It wasn't because any bitterness had melted away. I simply didn't want the quiet to stretch on, to say everything for me. I listened as my mother sounded as though she'd been saving her words for a long time. I stayed silent. She lingered, then filled the silence in her usual way, offering explanations wrapped in concern. "She's struggling," my mother said softly. "Beatrice hardly touches her food. She doesn't leave her room. She keeps wondering whether I've replied." The faint chime of ceramic drifted through the background, most likely her kitchen. It was probably that familiar blue teacup she always reached for to soften her presence. "I wish you were with us," she finished. Staring out the cabin window, I saw the lake outside had become perfectly still. The sky pressed low and wide, a cold so deep it made every sound seem faint. I finally replied, "for years. You just never noticed." A quiet settled between us. It wasn't defensive or hurried, just still. "I didn't realize you—" I heard her voice, softer and more fragile than before, as she explained how it felt that way. She pointed out that I had never told her and claimed nobody had brought it up. I watched as she exhaled slowly. Not quite a sigh, more the quiet sound of accepting that there were no more lines that fit. She apologized, but her words felt unsure. I stayed silent. In that pause, she seemed to understand, because for once she didn't try to fix anything. There were no justifications, no gentle attempts to revise the past, only the quiet of her breathing, a faint clock chime nearby, and the hush between us as we realized something had faded long before. What remained now was only the reverberation. "Will you be coming back?" she finally inquired. I surveyed my surroundings, the wood flooring, a woolen throw draped over a chair, the wind brushing against the panes. Everything is uncomplicated. Everything belongs to me. Softly, I told her no. It seems I've discovered where I truly belong. We let our conversation simply dwindle away, without saying farewell. I remained in place for a bit, absorbing the silence surrounding me. The pain was gone by then, but so was any sense of solace. All that remained was an honest sense of reality. At the following dawn, I found myself awake before the sun. The cabin remained enveloped in a particular hush, the kind that makes no demands of me. I bundled myself in a heavy sweater and wandered out onto the rear deck. The surface of the lake lay perfectly still, mirroring the faint golden glow of the ascending sun. The sky was vast and clear, and for the first time, its emptiness brought me serenity. I brewed a cup of tea, jotted a handful of thoughts in my journal, and took out the luxurious stationery I had packed from home but had never bothered to use. I penned one simple letter, brief and honest, not a word of accusation or record of grievances, only this: I hope you find peace. I hope you are truthful. I hope that in 2 months, things will be different. Usually the invitation arrives before the apology. I wrote out my full signature, folded the letter with care, and addressed it to the house where I spent my childhood. I didn't include a return address. Later that same day, I went into town and slipped it into a Scarlett mailbox beside a bakery that smelled like burnt cardamom. The man at the register gave me a nod as I walked by, recognizing me from the previous afternoon. "Chilly today," he remarked. I gave him a small smile, not quite as cold as the previous day. Heading home, I paused at the lagoon's edge. There was one bench facing the water. I took a seat, drank coffee from a paper cup, and watched the vapor slowly fade into the air. My phone stayed tucked away in my pocket, untouched. Back at the cabin, I uploaded one final photo: a single wooden chair, empty, framed by the snow, with the lake stretching out just beyond it. No caption accompanied it, but I understood exactly what I meant. They would realize it, not because they were watching me, but because silence always highlights absence after it has lingered for a while. That night, I didn't look at my messages, didn't scroll through anything, and didn't bother thinking about what people might be saying back in Baltimore. Instead, I prepared some soup, lit a candle, draped a blanket over my knees, and reread the same section of a book 3 separate times. I didn't do this because I lacked focus, but because I didn't want to rush out of stillness. There was nothing triumphant here, only understanding. No finality, just some room to breathe. And for the first time in a long while, I no longer felt invisible. I simply felt,